All right, guys, answering your questions again. These are all from YouTube, and we have so many, so I'll do my best. If you have questions for the Q&A, leave them in the comments down below. Let's get started. Next one, Bradley Power, one of our members. Thank you for being a member. How do you make sure the left and right channels are balanced in the mix? Is it okay to pick at slightly different LUFS? Thanks. Okay, Bradley, first of all, the LUFS doesn't peak. I just want to make this sure. It's kind of normal that LUFS doesn't measure exactly the same left and right. LUFS or RMS, it's an average scale and measurements that measure the power and the energy long term. Or even if it's short term, it's not instant like peak nominal level. Completely normal to have small differences, not 2 dB differences, because that's going to be a big problem. If we talk about peak nominal level, that is also normal that it's not exactly the same left to right. It shouldn't, unless you literally just use loops normalized left and right. And even at that point, the sum of the elements will give you small differences between left and right. If you do have a discrepancy in left and right on an average measurement, so LUFS or RMS, you do have a problem unless the song that you're producing is some weird experimental stuff that has, I don't know, one sub-synth on the side and an acoustic guitar on the left and I don't know, whatever else. So you understand what I mean. If your mix is the song by arrangement, by design, has a completely asymmetrical arrangement and setup where instrument completely miss on one side and they are like huge on the other side. Unless that's the case, any mainstream genre, pop, rock, metal, industrial, EDM, dance, reggae, you name it, it shouldn't. It shouldn't be pretty damn consistent. And you shouldn't have to do anything specific for that to happen. Again, if that doesn't happen, you have either a problem in your analog chain, if you're using analog, or the arrangement, it needs to be reconsidered. It's art, so you can, but I myself am a Virgo, so as you can see everything around me, I am a symmetry freak. And I actually have to force myself when I do mixes to create discrepancies left and right. And still, I have my methods to kind of counterbalance. If I have a guitar on one side, I will never leave one sound on one side, hard panned, that is like very prominent in a mix without having anything on the other side. It makes my skin crawl. But that's just me. And I will probably make an effect just to counterbalance and just to move things around. So it's still symmetrical in my head, even if I learn how to make asymmetrical mixes. But yeah, you shouldn't have that kind of a problem. Another one, this one is from Wolffish, another of our members. Thank to each and every member for supporting the channel. I hope you guys like the exclusive content and there's a lot more coming out your way. Hi David, I got this idea that I will run my mix bus out of my interface, then through a Neal preamp 5211 with red silk and output transformers to get analog mojo, then in a taggler cream them back to the interface. Does this sound like a good plan or just crazy? No, this is very normal. It's extremely normal. You're not doing actually anything particularly crazy at all. And you got 2 processing, basically. You have a transformer and a compressor. That's it. There's absolutely nothing crazy in doing that. Just make sure you have good converters, because you don't want to go out with your mix and back in unless you have good converters. No, I mean, if you take my 2 bus, then that's probably considered a bit crazy, even though I don't use everything all the time in my 2 bus. I have my Neal 542s, I have the HG2, the Fusion, the SPL PQ, and generally my West Audio mastering 2-bus compressor and the Spacecraft. Now this is crazy. On top of that, I can drag anything that I have in my racks in this chain if I want. So if I want to, I don't know, if I want to put the Empress Pultec EQ in it, I can. If I want to put the Mag, I can. If I want to put the 670 Fairchild in it, I can take things off. So that's more crazy, but also I do this for a living and I never know what songs I'm gonna mix next, so I need versatility. No, what you're doing is completely normal. Next one, when do you use the different EQ processing modes in Pro Q3 as phase shifting can occur? Is this something you have to be aware of in the sense that if you hear a change in volume, that you change modes, similarly when you do use auto gain? Okay, so Pro Q3 has linear phase, has natural phase, and then zero latency. Granted that I don't use Pro Q3 that much anymore, I default usually to Nova as my general EQ or Kirchhoff EQ. But the different modes should not change anything in level. If you switch from zero latency to linear phase, levels are not gonna change. They should not change. I personally was never a fan of natural phase of Pro Q3. Don't ask me why, it's just there's a feeling to it that I just kinda always prefer either zero latency or just another EQ. I don't find much use for linear phase EQs unless I'm doing parallel processing with them. And if I do use a linear phase EQ, yeah, sometimes it can be Pro Q3 just if it's something not important in a mix, I don't feel like opening anything else, but otherwise I use other EQs. As for auto gain is an amazing feature that I think every EQ should have, because one of the biggest bias when we use equalization is exactly the change in volume, right? If you're cutting, you're not gonna like it that much because the volume is lower, and if you're boosting, everything sounds prettier because it's louder. So I think auto gain on Pro Q3 should be pretty much a default, or any other EQ that has it. Is definitely a function that helps tremendously. And if you're using an EQ that doesn't have auto gain, or if you're using analog, I have a video where I show a trick to kind of reset your hearing, even though some EQs, most analog EQs especially, don't have an output knob. So for example, API 5500 or the Empress or even, you know, the SPL, most EQs don't. Let's say you're deciding if you should boost 50 Hertz or 40 Hertz, right? Or 12K or 10K. Don't turn the EQ on and switch the frequency, but set it to, like, let's say 10K, then turn it off, then turn it on and listen. Then turn it off again, switch to 12K or 50 to 40, and then turn it on again. So turn it off before you change settings. This way you always have the baseline in your memory and in your ears. And this is not mandatory, it's just a trick if you're just starting and you have hard time deciding because, oh my God, 10K sounds good, oh, 12K sounds good too. If you do this, if you bypass or turn the analog off every single time before you change settings, it helps you reset your brain. This one is from Travesty. When using analog comps, EQs, etc. on one audio track, but you want to use them on other audio sources, do record and bake in those analog moves and then move to the next element? No. I buy another EQ or another compressor that I need to use on the next track. I talked about this, and I'm not joking, by the way. I talked about this many times. Why do you think I have multiple distressors or multiple fatzos or the same, like 1, 2, 3, 4 1176s? Because that's not the way you mix in analog. That is not the way you mix in analog. You don't use, let's say, an 1176 on vocals, and then if you want to use it on bass, you print the vocals and you put it on bass, and then if you want to use it on snare, you print that bass too, and like, that's hell. First of all, the biggest problem with this is you can't change things in real time. What are you gonna do? As you go on with your mix and you printed your bass, now you want to change it, what you do? You go back and reset the compressor and reprint it again. How long does it take to finish a mix? A mix of like 120 tracks. So not only you're wasting a ridiculous amount of time, but also it simply can't be done because you need to hear the changes in real time, right? And it's called a mix because things mix together and gel together, right? If I EQ a vocal with a hardware EQ, that will change my perception of the synth. And then, you know, if I EQ the synth, I'm just gonna have to tweak it, see, like this. That's also another reason as to why people at home that work so, like this idea of working things in isolation I'm gonna mix my kick, and then I'm gonna mix my snare and put it together, and then the melody, and then the 808, and then the vocals, and then you open up and it sounds like ass. That's why, because you can't do that. You can't mix individual elements and then put them together hoping that they will sound good together. It doesn't work like that. So when you use a compressor on a vocal and you need that unit for another track, you buy another one. That's why we have walls and walls of gear, because you know everything needs to understand this. When I mix with analog, right? Everything that goes to the analog goes to the analog at the same time. So let's say, example, like vocal number 1 will go to that distressor, vocal number 2 will go to that 1176, the bass is going to go to the fatso, and then the vocals also go to the Mag EQ, and the other vocal goes to the Empress EQ, and then the guitars will go to the successor, or the background vocals will go to the RIA, or the other things will go to the drums will go to the 5500 and the second fatso, and then everything goes to the 2-bus. So you understand that that's how analog mixing work, and you know it's unthinkable to do that with like 1-2 units to start printing left and right. That's not how it works. Next one, Armin E. Hi David, lately the subject has been bothering me, not sure if it's an issue or not, but would a Sammi mixer with inserts essentially reduce my ADDA round trips when printing my 2-bus through my analog gear, or is it a no-win situation either way? So first of all, of course, the more ADDA round trip you have, the worse, you know, it's gonna be. With that said, a Sammi mixer will absolutely not help you reduce those ADDA round trips. Why would it? A Sammi mixer, let's say you have 12 channels, right? It still requires 12 analog I/O on your interface or your converter to send those channels to the Sammi mixer, and then the Sammi mixer sums to a 2-track, a stereo output, where you have, I assume, in that insert your 2-bus processing, which, let's keep it simple, an EQ and a hardware analog compressor. The Sammi mixer won't make any difference in ADDA round trip, because if you don't have a Sammi mixer, you're simply gonna put your 2-bus processing in, let's say, hardware insert number 1, 2 on your 2-bus. That's it. You still have 1 ADDA round trip. I am almost worried that you are doing what the previous question was asking. You're trying to run multiple tracks on the same hardware, like for example, the drums on that compressor and the vocals on that compressor. If that's the case, scratch all that. I hope that's not the case, and maybe I'm misunderstanding. If that's the case, that's not how you mix with analog gear. I said it in the previous question, but Sammi mixer won't do anything. The only thing that will do is literally taking your groups, right, and sum them externally through transformers into a 2-track, where then you apply your EQ and compressor, your 2-bus processing. But that doesn't change your ADDA conversion. If anything, we could argue that you are now sending 1, 2, 3, let's say 12 tracks, groups out of your DA. So you in this way, you have more, okay? You could possibly have more degradation, which is gonna be minimal, but still, if you wanna be anal about it, you probably have more, because you're sending multiple tracks out as opposed to one final mix. So no, definitely the Sammi mixer wouldn't help you. Next one, Kadoki Po. Do pro mix engineers use reverb or slap delay on master? If yes, how they do it? I definitely hear stereo on kick and bass on many popular hits, and analyzers shows it too. Kick in the middle, it's past. Okay, let's put it this way. First of all, slap delay on a master, nobody does it unless they are drunk. So that's unheard of. Reverb on a master, in 0.0001% of the cases, a mastering engineer that is sent a mix to master that is particularly dry, and it's just one of those very rare occasions in which a little bit of reverb would go gel thing together and actually improve the, you know, spaciousness of the mix. Yes, it happened, it happens, it's beyond rare. It's beyond rare. What you're talking about I'm very confused as to why you say like kick in the center is passed. I guarantee you it's not passed. The kick needs to be in the center, so the bass and so the lead vocals and the snare and many other key elements in a mix. What you hear is simply an effect, but it doesn't mean that it's applied to the master. A kick can have a stereo reverb. Kick is mono, can have a stereo effect. Bass is mono, can have a stereo effect. Yes, absolutely. But that does not mean that someone applied, especially a slap delay, that's a first, on a master, and reverb on a master is extremely, extremely rare. So it's just simply mono elements that I promise you it's not passed. They need to stay in the center. They have stereo effects. That's totally normal. Can we only depend on the imager on the mastering without putting it in specific channels? No, I mean, assuming that you're mixing and mastering your own song, so you do everything, no, why would you do that? You should not delegate anything to mastering if you are the mix engineer and the mastering engineer. If you're mixing and mastering, it's still your ears, your skills, your gear, your room, your speaker, your song, and your plugins and everything else. So don't delegate anything to an hour later, because nothing is gonna change. It's still you in the same room doing the same things. If you want your mix wider, make it wider in the mix, because if it's you mastering your song, you're just gonna grab your mix and open another project. Nothing changed, right? And every processing that is done in mastering, it's somewhat a compromise, although there's a group of things, a category of things that are better done on a final mix, as opposed to go and tweak the single channels. Okay, that's a whole different discussion and a long answer to that. There are some things that not only are better done in mastering on a finished 2-track stereo mix, it's just the only way to achieve certain results. But in the case of stereo imaging and width of a mix, no, you're better off doing it in mix than rely on a stereo width widener in mastering, because it's, you know, sometimes it can be, definitely can be more destructive than doing in a mix on individual channels. You have much more control. If you are the mastering engineer and someone sent you their mix to master, the question is not even there, because you don't have access to the mix. So you do what you have to do in mastering. If you guys have questions for the Q&A, leave them in the comments down below. Consider using the super thanks and support the channel. Click the join button and access the exclusive members only mix and mastering courses. Many more are coming in the next weeks. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video, comment down below. See you next time.
Hands on my neck, hands get my throat. Lift me up, man, take control. Heart is so gone, my type. Don't you know I fall for the bad type? You play the role of an angel pretty well, but I can